Here is your story. From Arrested to Awakened, my shocking identity reveal. The handcuffs clicked shut around my wrists on a Tuesday morning, and the sound echoed through my chest like a gunshot. I was standing in the parking lot of a grocery store, in the same town where I had lived for 31 years, surrounded by police officers who were calling me by a name I had answered to my entire life, a name I would soon discover that had never truly belonged to me. It began with something small, the way catastrophic things often do. I had applied for a passport renewal, a routine task I had put off for years. The clerk at the county office smiled at me politely, tapped something into her computer, and then her smile disappeared. She asked me to wait. Another person came, then another, and before I fully understood what was happening, there were 2 officers standing beside me, telling me that the Social Security number I had used for 3 decades, the one on my birth certificate, my driver's license, my mortgage, my children's school records, did not belong to me. It belonged to a man who had died in 1987, 4 years before I was even born. I remember standing there completely still, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the clerk pretending to look at her screen, and thinking, this is a mistake. It had to be a mistake. My name was Daniel Mercer. I had a mother named Patricia, a late father named George, a sister in Ohio, a house with a rusted mailbox, and a daughter who called me Daddy every single morning. I was real. My life was real. And yet, in the cold language of government databases, I did not exist. They took me to the station. They were not unkind, but they were thorough. They fingerprinted me. They photographed me. They sat me in a room with bad coffee and a water-stained ceiling tile and asked me questions I could not answer. Where was I born? I told them, St. Mary's Hospital, Crestfield, Ohio. They typed it in and shook their heads. No record. What was my mother's maiden name? I told them Whitfield. They asked for her Social Security number. I gave it to them. Another shake of the head. The number was registered to a woman who had moved to Canada in 1979 and had no children listed on record. I sat there in that plastic chair and felt the floor of my identity simply give way beneath me, like rotted wood collapsing under a single footstep. Everything I had taken for granted, my name, my history, my legal existence was dissolving in front of me in real time, replaced by nothing but questions and the slow, terrible dawning of a truth I was not yet ready to face. They called it a fraudulent identity case. They did not say I was a criminal, but they did not say I wasn't either. My daughter was 7 years old at the time. Her name was Lily, and she had my eyes, or what I had always believed were my eyes, dark brown, slightly too large for her face, always wide open and looking at the world like it owed her a wonder. When my wife, Camille, came to pick me up from the station that evening, Lily was in the back seat. She pressed her face against the window and waved at me like I'd just come back from a long trip. I waved back and felt something in my throat tighten so hard I couldn't speak for the entire drive home. That night, after Lily was asleep, Camille and I sat at the kitchen table and I told her everything. She had married Daniel Mercer. She had built a life with Daniel Mercer. And now we were both sitting in our kitchen at midnight, wondering if that man had ever actually existed. She didn't cry right away. She just kept very still, the way she always did when something was too large to process immediately. And she held my hand across the table and she said, "We'll figure this out. I have loved her for 11 years, and I have never loved her more than I did in that moment. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of truth, and drop a like on this video right now. You don't know how much that small act of support means to someone sharing their most vulnerable story." The investigation lasted 4 months. During that time, I hired a lawyer named Deborah Voss, a small, precise woman who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and never once made me feel like a criminal. She was the first person in this entire ordeal who spoke to me like a human being rather than a case file. She explained what the authorities believed had happened. My parents, the people I knew as my parents, had obtained a false identity for me at birth. The original Daniel Mercer had died as a newborn, and his birth certificate had been illegally acquired and repurposed. It was something that happened more often than people realized in the late 80s. She said, usually in situations involving families fleeing something. Debt, danger, a past too heavy to carry forward. My father, George, had died when I was 22. My mother, Patricia, was living in an assisted care facility 2 states away, deep in the grip of dementia. She could no longer tell me anything. She could barely tell me her own name on good days. So the answers I needed most, and who am I? Where did I come from? Why did you do this? Were locked inside a mind that the disease had already dismantled, room by room, like a house being slowly gutted from the inside. Deborah helped me submit DNA through a genealogy database, the kind people use to trace ancestry. I remember the night the results came back. Camille was beside me. Lily had already gone to bed. I opened the email on my laptop at the kitchen table, and my hands were shaking so badly that Camille had to scroll down for me. The results showed genetic matches to a family in western Pennsylvania. A family with a different last name. A family I had never heard of. A family that included a woman, 63 years old, retired schoolteacher, listed as a close familial match. The kind of match that only comes from a parent. Her name was Ruth. Deborah made contact first to explain the situation before I reached out. Ruth called me 3 days later. I had rehearsed what I was going to say for 72 hours. And when I finally heard her voice on the phone, soft, slightly hoarse, careful, every word I had prepared vanished completely. She did not need me to say anything, as it turned out. She had been looking for me for 29 years. Her story came out slowly over several phone calls, and then finally in person when I drove to Pennsylvania on a rainy Saturday in November with Camille beside me and Lily in the back seat asking if we were going to a party. Ruth had been 19 years. Old and alone when she gave birth. To a son she named James, she had been in a desperate situation, no money, no family support. A boyfriend who had disappeared. A woman she trusted, a neighbor with connections she never fully understood, had told her the baby would be placed with a safe family. She had signed papers she didn't fully comprehend, and then her son was gone, and every attempt she made to find him afterward hit walls that seemed to be made of solid stone. James, my name was James Allen Whitford. The name felt foreign and familiar at the same time. Like a song you heard once as a child and forgot entirely, but whose melody your body still remembers. When Ruth and I met for the first time, we stood in the doorway of a small diner in her town, and she looked at my face, the way someone looks at a photograph they've been searching for in a drawer for years, with recognition, with relief, and with a grief so old it had turned quiet. She reached up and touched my cheek with her hand, and I let her, and neither of us said anything for a long time. We didn't need to. Some reunions don't happen in words. They happen in the body, in the gut, in the place beneath language where the deepest truths live. I am not going to tell you that everything became easy after that. It didn't. The legal process of establishing my true identity took another 8 months. There were forms and hearings and moments of bureaucratic absurdity that would have been almost funny if the stakes hadn't been so enormous. I had to essentially prove that I existed. Prove it from scratch. Like a man building a foundation under a house that had been standing, improbably, for 31 years without one. There were moments I broke down. There were nights I sat in the garage alone because I didn't want Lily to see me cry, and I cried harder than I had since childhood, grieving the name I had lost, the parents I could no longer confront, the self I thought I knew. There were moments I was furious, at George and Patricia, at the system that had made this possible, at the universe for the sheer randomness of how identity can be constructed and unmade. Anger is part of awakening, I learned. You cannot skip it. It is the fire that burns away everything that was never real, so that you can finally see what is. What remained, once the fire had done its work, was this Camille who had not left. Lily, who still called me daddy every morning without hesitation. Ruth, who sent me a birthday card for the first time in her life that November and cried on the phone when I called to thank her. And myself, James, Daniel, both. Neither. A man who had been given 2 names, 2 histories, 2 griefs, and had somehow arrived at a single, solid, undeniable truth that identity is not a document. It is not a number in a government database. It is not the name your parents gave you, or failed to give you, or stole for you out of desperation. Identity is what you choose to carry forward. It is the love you refuse to abandon. It is the person you become in the wreckage of everything you thought you were. I stood in that parking lot in handcuffs and I thought my life was ending. Instead, it was beginning, for the first time with my eyes fully open. If this story moved something inside you, if it reminded you that truth, no matter how long it hides, always finds its way to the surface, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support doesn't just reach an algorithm, it reaches me. And it tells me that this story, the most terrifying and transformative story of my life, was worth telling out loud. Before we close, I want to ask you something in the comments below. Has there ever been a moment in your life when you discovered something that completely changed how you saw yourself? Share it below. You never know who needs to read your words today. I am learning slowly to answer to both names when the world calls me. Some days I am Daniel, the man who raised himself on familiar streets and loved his daughter into existence. Some days I am James, the boy who was lost before he could speak, finally found by a mother who never stopped looking. Most days I am simply the man sitting at the kitchen table at 7 in the morning, watching Lily eat cereal with her hair still tangled from sleep, thinking that whatever my name is, whatever my origin is, this ordinary, irreplaceable, miraculous moment is exactly who I am supposed to be.